Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Zach, and I am the Digital Communications Manager at America's Voice. And today I'm going to present a collaborative project that we've been working on with Immigration Hub, tracking the GOP's relentless anti-immigrant messaging and testing how to respond. Unfortunately, due to some scheduling conflicts today, the Hub is unable to be with us. But we wanted to make sure that all the data and research that we've been compiling over the last year and the years past really is available for all of you in attendance today. So as I begin, I'm not really able to see anybody that's in the audience. So, please put any questions that you have throughout the presentation today. I'm happy to kind of stop and answer those as we kind of go along. But with that, I'm just going to go ahead and start and kind of present a little bit of what we've been finding and some of the research that we have. So here to start off here. So when we really begin in 2022, really the question for us is not whether the GOP will use coded xenophobic appeals as a main part of their strategy. We know that they will, because they have told us repeatedly that that's exactly what they are going to do. For example, Senator Lindsey Graham as Lindsey Graham was saying right there, this is back in February 23rd on Hannity. And he says, I predict that the immigration will be a bigger issue in 2022 than it will be in 2016. Or to take the actions of the two main party committees, the National Republican Congressional Committee, the NRCC, and the National Republican Senatorial Committee, the NRSC, who in November of this year started to put out some ads. So let's take a quick look at what those ads look like. All right. There we go. So like I said, that was an ad that started to air on November 7th from the NRCC and got Politico to write up that GOP seizes on immigration for 2022 by spending $100,000 on a one-day ad buy. Now, that at the exact same time, the NRSC was running ads on YouTube that looked like this. So since we know Republicans are running nativist politics, the important question for us becomes whether or not Democrats have an effective counter strategy. But before we turn to that question, let's first examine how the GOP distributes their dog whistle messages, why these tactics work, and what do the specific trends look like. Because if we're going to have any hope of really developing an effective counter strategy, it's necessary to fully diagnose the problem at hand. Now, there is no denying that Republicans have an effective distributed messaging network that can create a new novel dog whistles that quickly take hold as powerful messaging tools. So let's quickly trace a brief timeline of the rhetorical frame of the Biden border crisis as an example to see how this process works. So on January 20th, the day the Biden was sworn into office, the anti-immigrant hate group, the Federation for American Immigration Reform, or FAIR, put out a press release warning of a coming Biden border crisis. The very next day, Mark Morgan, formerly the head of CBP under Trump, and now the senior fellow at the same hate group FAIR, goes on Fox to push that crisis narrative. By March, the Republican Study Committee sends a memo to its 153 House members, urging them to use the hashtag Biden border crisis in their messaging. Republican members then begin a process of staging numerous press conferences and voter photo ops around the hashtag. Republicans then use the coverage by Fox and other right-wing media outlets to validate their narrative. All the while, they are asserting a political attack that the Biden administration for not adopting the crisis narrative, repeatedly complaining that Biden refuses to call it a crisis. At the same time, Republicans wage a similar attack on the media, claiming bias for not adopting their dog whistle crisis frame. Falling right into the trap of the mainstream media, the mainstream media then breathlessly covers the issue and adopts the crisis frame. Their their coverage is then exploited by Republicans as validation for their political framing. And that is so it's not some kind of political framing, but instead a factual neutral position. After establishing the Biden border crisis dog whistle, Republicans then are able to exploit it for their own political benefit. So we see here throughout the rest of the year, for example, in July, Republicans looked to the issue to boost their political profile by sending troops to the border. In August, as the Delta variant emerged in the US and COVID cases were again on the rise, Republicans employed the border crisis narrative to avoid responsibility. In September, as refugees fleeing Haiti appeared at the Del Rio, Texas, Republicans seamlessly used their border crisis dog whistle to frame the issue. Then, recently in November, as the Omicron variant was discovered, Republicans and their allies quickly slotted this right into that ongoing narrative. All of this was boosted by online digital media activity. This included 3,303 Facebook ads that employed the Biden border crisis dog whistle, delivered to 101.7 million times to Facebook users throughout this year. So the right-wing media also does a lot of heavy lifting in this effort. So according to social media listening analysis from GQR, Facebook and Twitter interactions on immigration are often driven by right-wing media and influencers. Right-wing outlets were responsible for, on average, about 7 of the 10 highest engagements around these articles. Users in private and public right-leaning Facebook groups also act as a force multiplier for these anti-immigrant narratives, often repeating the same things that show up on Fox News or other anti-immigrant websites, and kind of sharing those in those private groups and distributing those messages. Now, as we look to 2022, we should remember that Republicans will use a combination of paid advertising, free social media platforms, right-wing media networks, and highly mobilized activist base to move their dog whistle tactics, which can quickly take hold in the mainstream media narrative. But really the next question is how do these dog whistle tactics operate? So without any concrete policy proposals that would improve the lives of most Americans, Republicans must rely on a coded racist appeals to mobilize voters. Activating anxieties around scarcity of resources, personal and public safety, and a forgotten, overlooked sense of self and community, their tactics provide a believable, however false, explanation that those anxieties start and end at your neighbor's doorstep. Crafting a compelling fiction that any social improvement can only come at their voters' direct expense. That Democrats' plans are dangerous, unfair, and only benefit others. This divide and distract strategy avoids the explicit racist language, granting both plausible deniability that racism is the active ingredient and the permission structure to vote based on those alleged race-neutral anxieties. Importantly, while the GOP is intentionally employing racist rhetoric, most voters are not consciously responding to racist sentiments, and they're actually resentful of any such allegations. So, beyond the border crisis, what are the other messages that Republicans are moving? So, Republicans' top line message will likely sound something like this. Democrats are controlled by the radical socialist left who wants to kill our jobs, open our borders, indoctrinate our kids, and let crime run rampant. They'll sound something like very similar to this very new ad from the NRCC that started to air this week. It went like this. So that's just a little bit of a sample of what some of that messaging will look like. While our research shows that dog whistle attacks around critical race theory or defunding the police will definitely be a key component for Republican messaging moving throughout 2022, we want to really just kind of set those aside for right now and really focus in on the anti-immigrant messaging trends and how Republicans will look to exploit voters' anxieties around this issue in particular. So the message that plays on anxieties around good jobs or public benefits that most folks have about like whether or not they can have a good paying job that's going to have benefits or any sort of public benefit that the government would offer. So Republicans will run ads, hitting on those anxieties that most people feel around the kitchen table. That will sound something like ex-Democrat voted for amnesty and massive payouts for millions of criminal illegals, rewarding lawbreakers with cash payments from your tax dollars and work permits to compete for your jobs. So looking at the anxieties around safety, also known as crime, drugs, and COVID, this message will sound something like this. Republicans, radical open border Democrats said nothing as millions of illegals snuck across the border, bringing crime, drugs, COVID into our communities. Or very much like Mike Gibbons, who is running for Senate in the GOP primary in Ohio, said in his one of his most recent ads here in November. So to be a little bit more specific on their messaging around drugs, which in particular may be effective as we move into 2022 and something of particular concern. So I think it will sound something like Democrats have let the cartels take over the border, flooding our communities with enough fentanyl to kill everyone in America many times over. So, and now if COVID remains a central to the conversation next summer, Republicans will also say something like, the same Democrats that want to shut down our economy, forced unconstitutional vaccine mandates on American citizens, allowed millions of illegals to walk into our country without no COVID checks. Now, again, all of these messages are not based in any sense of fact or reality, right? But that's not the point, right? Republicans are going to have to use this kind of scare tactics, use these dog whistles to frame their messages, to prey on these anxieties with coded racist messaging towards the electorate. So now, if we look to more of a general border safety message, likely will sound something like, Democrats don't care about your safety. They allow known terrorists, murderers, rapists to swarm our border. Worse, they even give these criminal illegals a free plane ticket to whatever state that they want to go to, and refuse to tell Biden or any Democrat if they're housing them in your neighborhoods, in our neighborhoods. So, and then continuing to kind of look about how they were going to exploit fears about a changing America, laundering really white nationalist ideas around the Great Replacement. Republicans will stoke these and identity anxieties with messages that kind of sound similar to, Democrats won't stand up to the open border socialists controlling the Democratic Party, allowing over 2 million illegal aliens to flood across the border, and that's more people than all of Columbus, Cleveland, and Cincinnati combined, to use a very specific Ohio-based messages that we might see. So in one telling example, Elise Stefanik, the third-ranking House Republican, warned that so-called mass amnesty efforts would cause a permanent election insurrection, warning to Facebook users that a new, mostly non-white citizens represent a supposed dire threat. Now, as I said before, Stefanik's claim is really divorced from reality, as most of these dog whistle ads are. But the facts here are not the point. This is a soft version of a white nationalist replacement theory, the racist fiction that migrants will destroy Western civilization and democracy. In laundering this white nationalist lie, the third-ranking House Republican is repurposing the ideas around the big lie and combining them with active, future-oriented xenophobia. This combination is not entirely new, but Stefanik's commitment to this dangerous politics really should be like a fluorescent warning sign for all of us about what is to come next year. Now, Stefanik's ads with this kind of white nationalist coded message really were shown to 1.4 million times to Facebook users, mostly over the age of 55, 95% of whom lived outside of her home state of New York. Now, we're likely to see a lot more of this type of ad throughout next year. Now, Democrats must have a plan to deal with this cynical electoral messaging strategy. It is ugly, but it has the potential to be quite effective. And effective not just with white voters. Ignoring their dog whistle tactics in favor of messaging that exclusively focuses on campaigns, like a Democratic campaign's positive policy agenda, is insufficient. So let's turn now to see like what effective counter strategy might look like. To kind of begin on how we might think about doing that, let's start with some broad suggestions when considering the development of a counter strategy to the onslaught of GOP dog whistle tactics. So first and foremost, the thing to kind of to remember is that there are no magic words, but there are winning strategies. This doesn't mean that this is hard. Instead, this means that there won't be a perfect one-size-fits-all solution. It's not what we're going to go through today is say, hey, say these words in this order, and then poof, this works everywhere. I wish it was that easy, but life's not that easy. It's going to be a little bit more difficult for us to figure out, but we can figure this out with good strategies. We also want to create space for voters to hear our message. So Republicans set this trap that any new social benefit, issue fix, or program expansion as a racialized zero-sum game. It comes at a direct cost to you for somebody else's benefit. Now, if Democrats must point out that trap, naming Republican strategy to create the space for voters to view their vision outside of this zero-sum perspective. Now, I really want to stress this next point because it is both empirically true and it goes against conventional wisdom. Immigration can be a winning issue for Democrats if they lean in. Immigration is not a loser. We can win on immigration if we fight to tell our story. We can win on immigration if we fight to tell our story. Now, Democrats must seize this issue away from Republicans. Running away from immigration does Democrats no favors. The American people are with us on this issue, but they are only currently mostly hearing only one misleading and dangerous narrative from Republicans. Kind of the last kind of big bucket to kind of think about as we kind of move into how to think about developing these strategies is to saturate, right? One ad won't do. There's nothing novel to say that we are competing for voters' attention more than ever before. Democrats must meet voters where they are at, consistently, at scale. We have to constantly win voters' attention. We can do this by creatively delivering a message that acknowledges that we aren't just telling something to voters, but we're taking them somewhere new over time. So let's get a little bit more practical, a little bit more granular here, and looking at some of the message testing that the Immigration Hub did and has been conducting to kind of further figure out how we might respond to these anti-immigrant dog whistle attacks from Republicans. So first, let's turn to a 2018 kind of case study from Pennsylvania. So as folks may or may not remember, caravan ads and anti-immigrant politics were front and center of the Republican messaging in the 2018 midterms. But we also might remember that Democrats won those elections in some of the biggest margins since post-Watergate. So the Immigration Hub did some really important, innovative work kind of testing what messages were out there, both Republican messaging and then competing it against a more progressive, forward-leaning immigration narratives. So looking at Pennsylvania specifically, there, Republican Scott Wagner ran a caravan ad that ended up backfiring. This increased the turnout and tensions of liberal-leaning and moderate women by between 6 and 8 percentage points. The Hub's veteran ad here, which I will play, had a positive turnout effect on liberal women, increasing voter intention by 11%. So I'll just go ahead and play this little snippet of this ad that the Hub ran in Pennsylvania in 2018. Oh. So that's just a little bit of the snippet. It kind of goes on, runs a little bit longer here. But the veterans video also had a positive impact with rural voters, men and women combined, increasing net Democratic turnout intentions by 15%, as well as in the suburbs by 8%. 27% of Pennsylvania voters who viewed the caravan ad that Scott Wagner ran were moved, including 33% of moderate suburban women were moved against that candidate. So, also in 2018, the Hub did some comparison tests in the Colorado 6 congressional House district in that race between Republican Mike Kaufman and Democrat Jason Crow. In that district, the Hub tested a Trump caravan ad, finding that 51% of voters, including 62% of women and 71% of Hispanics, were less likely to support Trump's immigration policies after they saw the Trump caravan ads that were really running all over the place during the 2018 election. So I'll play another kind of version of what some of the Immigration Hub, kind of the ads that they were kind of testing in Colorado looked like. So they ran this ad, and they also ran a similar version to the Garrett veteran ad that you saw previously in the Pennsylvania race. And those veteran ads had a 47% of voters, including 52% of women and 54% of Hispanics and 35% of independents, were less likely to vote Republicans after watching that positive immigration ad. And after watching the Hub's Kaufman video, of which we just saw, 50% of voters expressed serious doubts about voting for Kaufman, including 61% of women, 59% of Hispanics, and 42% of independent voters. Both of the Hub's ads had a positive of. Oh, sorry. Um, both of the Hub's ads had a positive effect after watching both videos. So Jason Crow, the Democrat in the race, widened his lead over Mark Kaufman to 50% over 40%. So again, in 2020, the Hub did some voter study, really trying to craft a level of and figure out voters in particular states that they were able to move. With family patriots. So folks that have a sense of family values, but also consider themselves patriots and kind of overlapping values around there. So this voter model exercise was really targeted across Colorado, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And the most persuadable voters skewed suburban, white, not college educated, and male. Across all 4 states, this block of voters was more susceptible to being moved by the Hub's ads. The inclusion of some white non-college men may be counterintuitive, but they found that many audiences that are more sympathetic to immigrants, i.e., white college women and people of color, are already supportive of Democrats on their positions of immigration. So kind of adding in and targeting some of those white non-college educated men, right, you're able to kind of move some more folks as well, who may be a little bit more skeptical on the issue. So looking to measure this impact of their ads, the Hub found that these ads didn't just move undecided voters, but were effective in damaging Trump's support. They saw Trump's support decrease and Biden's support increase by 7% among men, 7% among college-educated voters, and 10% among voters over the age of 50 who saw an anti-Trump ad. Of which here I'll show you kind of a little bit of what that ad looked like. So now they ran another ad, a pro-Biden ad that increased enthusiasm for Biden supporters to vote for him. So what they found was that 84% rate of enthusiasm for supporting Biden and a 7 or higher after viewing the ad compared to 79% who just watched only a pro-Trump ad. So they were able to kind of move some even move people that were already sympathetic to Biden at and win them back when they started to run ads and target these voters. So again, this is just kind of like a little snippet of some of the ads that they were running in 2020. And really, again, what they were finding with the testing while they were going out and showing these ads to voters, right? They were able to move them, and they were able to be moved if we engage them in this conversation. So, digging in a little bit deeper in the state by state, the hubs looked at Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Florida. Among voters who were persuadable on immigration or moderates, who viewed the GOP obstruction ad were more likely to approve of Biden's performance. So 58% versus 42% compared to respondents who just saw a GOP ad. So really what we're talking about here is that, again, the hub tested a Republican ad and showed the same voters a version of ad that they were running, kind of seeing the difference of how they responded to those ads, plus some control groups and being able to figure out this data in a scientific way. So I'm going to give you, again, another snippet of some of the ads that were running here in this 2021 case study in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Florida. So, that was really kind of like a more a pro ad that they were running. But again, they were the Immigration Hub was testing to see like what kind of different messages would work, and to see how do we develop an effective strategy. So this is another version of a slightly different ad that really kind of calls out the Republicans' obstruction. So I'm going to give you a snippet of a little bit what that ad looks like. So again, the ad kind of goes on a little bit more as well, just to kind of wrap up, right? But really, the point what they were trying to see here is to see if calling out the Republicans' obstruction was able to move voters. And really, what they found is that both calling out Republicans and socializing immigration solutions really helps moves voters in support of a pathway to citizenship for immigrants. Now, both of Hub's ads were effective at driving up positive sentiments towards immigration. However, the GOP ad that they tested this against was effective at convincing voters, 56% to 44%, that immigrants fueled the drug epidemic in the United States. So really, to kind of think about what this ad looks like was very similar to what I talked about at the top about how the Republicans, you know, obstruction and dog whistling around what's happening at the border and tying that to the drug crisis can be effective with voters, right? And so, really, we've been finding is that we need to call out the Republican game and also institute new solutions, real effective solutions to be able to win those voters back. Now, when we engage in that conversation, we are able to do that as the immigration hub's testing really kind of shows. But if we don't do that, right, we kind of leave that open and for Republicans to kind of play in that sphere, and that those messages can be effective. And again, not just effective with kind of base white voters that would already be voting for Republicans, but other voters that we can win back to vote for Democrats. So really to kind of wrap up some of the big kind of takeaways that the hub and we have been kind of discussing over this last year to figure out, how do we actually respond in ways that are effective? Like, what do we need to keep in mind? How do we need to think about this moving forward? And again, really, we want to kind of keep some of the ideas at a larger level, not because the granular isn't important, but because we understand that there won't be a one-size-fits-all solution. So you've seen in some of the hubs ads that we showed today, right? Kind of like a different couple different styles, right? So we want to always make sure that your organization is kind of meeting, and speaking in your voice, right? And talking about the issues that your organization is concerned with, but adding in the fight around immigration, whether you're an immigration organization so explicitly or you're not, right? But understand that this is a fight that Republicans are waging, and right. So if we're not engaged in this conversation, well, then we're letting that ground open for Republicans to talk to the same people that we want to be talking to as well. So these ads can look different and kind of have a different style. So I just kind of want to show another one of their ads as well that kind of has like a much different sort of internet vibe to it, to kind of think about how we might run some ads or run messaging that's a little bit different than the traditional aspect of this. So as we see in this ad, right, it's a lot more like memeable. It's and taking things from the internet, right, to kind of capture folks' attention, right. As we kind of I said at the top kind of this section, right, is that we need to be creative and thinking about how are we getting folks to see our message, to engage with them in the spaces of which that they are already engaging with, right. So we can intertwine that message, right? So if everything looks exactly like the same ads that have been running on TV around political ads over and over again for years, people mostly tune that stuff out. Now, those ads can be effective, and we should continue to do those sorts of things. We also want to expand how we think about reaching folks and reaching them with different kinds of messages. So really, I want to kind of end on thinking about our how we want to respond, really with kind of 4 key takeaways to really keep in mind. So the first and foremost is we need to, like I was saying there, is we need to fill the vacuum. Otherwise, the GOP will do it for us. Now, we, as part of the tracking that we at America's Voice have been doing, really can say that Republicans from the start of this year all the way throughout the entirety of this year, with real effort, are running on immigration issues. They are running with anti-immigrant dog whistles. And they have, again, repeatedly told us that that is what they are going to do. They are going to talk about immigration, and they're going to talk about it from a way that infuses it with other issues, that pits a zero-sum, racialized divide and distract game. And that is really harmful. And if Democrats do not respond, and I speak about Democrats, both of the candidates, but I think also those who are concerned about having Democrats win so that we can pass the policy agendas that we want, we also need to be engaged in this conversation as well. We can't say, well, this is an issue we can't talk about because it's difficult, or in the past it really has been the wedge that has really driven. It's not really a winner for us, right? So if we're not engaged in that conversation, that's really we're going to end up losing, and it's going to end up hurting us. So some folks at the hub, right, they talk about this a lot too, which is the 4 S's, which is sequence, saturate, soothe, and sway. And so really what this means is that we want to think about our message here, not as one-offs or thinking about it as in complete reaction to Republican messaging, but we should have a strategy about how we're going to sequence a message over time. With the advent of social media, right, with all of its ills, right, it also allows us to cheaply develop a message that we can put in front of voters over time. And so we should think about not just saying, okay, what is our 1 15-second message and then that's it, but how do we build on that message throughout the year, helping to tell a story, to help tell a more complex narrative that helps move people, that meets them where they're at, but doesn't keep them there. So the next part of that kind of goes right in is we need to saturate, right? That there is a lot competing for voters and people that we want to talk to's mind and attention. We live in a world of TikTok, of which I can scroll through and spend a couple minutes and see 500 different videos from lots of different creators and lots of interesting stuff. And so we can't just hope to say, let's put out one ad, let's run that ad for 6 months, not change it, and then hope that moves through, right? I mean, I think for anybody here watching today, right, like you know that wouldn't be effective for you, right? And so we need to think about how we are saturating, making sure that we are constantly in the conversation, competing for people's attention. So this next bit is to soothe, and what we really mean by this is that we want to understand and acknowledge people's anxieties, the same anxieties that Republicans are playing on. Now, they are telling a dog whistle racist narrative that pits a zero-sum game that plays on those anxieties. But those anxieties about safety, about jobs, about America and our future, right? Those are all anxieties that we have, right? That we care about and we talk about at the kitchen table that keep us up at night, and those anxieties are real. And we should understand those anxieties. But we need to tell a different story about how we actually address the problems that we face, how we actually soothe those anxieties. And it isn't between a coded racist message, but as a multiracial democracy that is building an American project, a project and a promise that started hundreds of years ago and that is not yet complete, and that we are working, and there is to build that project, that we can be a part of building it. It's not something that's done and finished, but something that we need to work on, right? And so I think thinking about meeting people's anxieties and understanding them is really important. So the final S here is to sway, right? And that goes a little bit in what I was talking about, is we want to meet people where they're at. We don't want to leave them there, right? We want to be able to move them on a message, right? The whole point of communicating your message politically is to move them to where you want to get to move the American people. And I think overall, American people are with us on immigration issues, but we still need to continue to move them on the policy issues, that Democrats are the ones that are going to deliver on these issues, and that Republicans are just playing political, cynical games around these issues and are not actually serious about fixing them. So really what that means, right, is that we want to create simplified solutions and value-based messaging, because those work. And a bit of that, right, is to know your audience and to keep it local and to demonstrate community, validating voices, and other mutual reliance. So there's a lot around immigration that is a national political story, and that is true. But the folks and that you take seriously are the ones that you know personally in your own lives, right? And that's the same through for our own audience, right? And so we really need to think about who are we actually trying to reach with our message, and are we speaking to them with a voice that is one that they will listen to, that they believe, and that can move them. So that's trying to, as much as possible, talk about these issues in a local context using local voices to uplift, right? And so I think for groups that don't have large budgets to run large, complex, ad campaigns, that doesn't mean you don't have a role to play in this, right? Is that you actually, are on the, like, groups like that are on the ground, organizing people, talking to people in the community, the community voices, and being able to uplift those voices is really important. Being able to have a message be believed and moved organically as well as paid throughout the community. And again, Facebook ads can be very cheap, and you can elevate those messages locally to a lot of people with very few ad dollars. And kind of the last point I want us to ruminate on as we think about how do we combat the GOP messaging is that we need to expose the GOP. It's not what they are doing is using racism and xenophobia and encoding those messages intentionally and strategically. And they are doing that so that they can create fear and anxiety as a means to situate their own power, to concretize their own power, to concretize their own, and to concentrate their own profits and those of their donors. And that strategy really hurts in real material costs for all working families throughout the United States. Because what the GOP is doing is they're using these racialized dog whistles as a means to distract from the fact that they are not delivering for regular people. They are not delivering on education, on healthcare, on good jobs, on building a brighter future for America. And we need to make sure that we are exposing that fact for most people who are not as politically plugged in as most people here on the call are today, and show that their obstruction is really is really a massive barrier for us to win the things to improve the lives of working families all across the United States. And I think that project is difficult, but it's one that we can do if we continue to do the work of exposing the GOP and what they are doing. So, I mean, ultimately, right, more work needs to be done in the political arena on this front. I think a lot of what this conference is talking about, right, is about how do we actually win in 2022? How do we think about moving this stuff forward? And while the Immigration Hub and America's Voice and other groups have done really good work doing research and analysis about message testing and thinking about how we can combat the GOP strategy and what those strategies look like, we really need more to be done, and more to be done in the political arena and testing those messages. And that doesn't mean you need to have a perfect thing, but we need to go out. We need to have an idea of a strategy we want to build about responding, thinking about some of the top kind of main points that we went over today. But how then we put that into practice, right? To see what actually is working, what's actually moving folks, and actually fighting and contesting these messages. Because the real thing is that Republicans have been doing this for a year, right? They're out constantly on Facebook, on Twitter, on other media sites, and they are reforming their message over time, tweaking their responses about what is working with voters and happy to move them. So this is a project that the Immigration Hub and we at America's Voice are going to be deeply committed to throughout 2022, thinking about tracking the Republicans' dog whistle, xenophobic and racist messaging, and thinking about and testing how do we respond. So if your organization is thinking about this as well this year, throughout the next year, thinking about how do we respond? How do we respond about immigration stuff, especially if you're not an immigration organization, but you're seeing these same anti-immigrant activity that we are, but don't really know how to respond. We'd be more than happy to work and support the efforts of your organization and have conversations kind of outside of these spaces about how might we best respond in a more detailed and granular fashion for your organization. So, and with that effort, America's Voice maintains a public-facing searchable database with all the ads that we are tracking that the GOP is doing throughout the year. So we're finding local school boards all the way up to Senate races all throughout the year. We've been doing this project for several years now, but we're continuing to track that information. So both on the organic side, so messages that happen on Twitter, also like what folks are saying on Fox News or OAN or any of the other right-wing networks, but also their paid advertising as well. So their Facebook posts, their TV ads, the YouTube ads, any kind of mailer or email list that they are sending out as well. So we're trying to collect all that stuff to really kind of keep a comprehensive list for folks to be able to look to see, hey, is the candidate running in my area? Are they using these ads? If so, what do those look like? And what are some resources I can have to combat those? So at gopadtracker.com, we update that site regularly with all of the new ads, and we'll be providing new resources there throughout next year as well for you to use to combat some of these ads. But you can kind of search by your state, kind of the race or topic at that website. So I encourage folks to kind of, take some time to look at those ads in your area. Be prepared, right? That these are some of the nasty, racist and xenophobic messaging there, right? But we want to be able to shine a spotlight on what the GOP is doing and the ads that aren't just in your area but are across the nation, so we can get a better sense of what this looks like. And one last point, and before I end here, I just will again encourage if anybody has any questions. I wanted to kind of frame this. Hopefully, that anybody had any questions, we can kind of engage and a little bit more of a dialogue on what you're seeing or what you're curious about. So please put those in the chat. I'd be happy to respond to any questions for folks. And then, but we will also be at America's Voice are going to be hiring either a full or part-time intern, depending on their schedule at the start of next year to kind of help do some of this tracking work. So if you're here today watching this and you're like, this is really interesting, it's something I want to know how to do. I'm interested in doing some of this work, kind of diving in a little bit more. Please feel free to reach out to me personally for if you're interested in that position, but also look back at America's Voice at the beginning of the new year. We'll be hiring for that position. So I'm going to go ahead and try to put my email in the chat if I can figure out how to do that. And I will see if there's any other questions that folks have. All right, I just realized that you guys probably didn't hear any of the ads that we're playing. So if you are interested to hear more about any of the ads that you didn't get the audio for, both either the ads that Immigration Hub was running or the ads that I showed from the Republican side, I'm happy to share those with anybody. And you can see my email there at the bottom.